Nick, you mentioned Senior Peer Support Project. What is that? That sounds intriguing to me. Good morning, Brenda. It is a great morning. Here in Connecticut, the sun is out. I did a Recovery Coach Academy last week, and I feared, the weather people the week before rustling up the concept of storms and the like, and we got through the week, and I'm exhausted today, but clearly it's a gorgeous and glorious morning. Enjoy it as much as possible. Hopefully, yeah, I'm looking for May too. Gosh. Actually, I'm looking forward to April baseball season. Yankees. As we begin this seminar, and please type as you need to type. Um, I love the collaboration that seminars or webinars offer. But clearly, with this particular webinar, I'll admit right up front, when Stacy and I came together and Stacy verbalized, yes, oh, good, 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 good. Oh, multiple pathways conference, fantastic. As Stacy and I were pondering what would be able to present, and Stacy spoke of the fact that CCAR is looking to develop um, training relative to working with veterans, and she asked me, would I do this? I'm open to the opportunity and experience. As much as I didn't know about helping veterans, I certainly wanted to know. And if you've been around me long enough, you know that I'm a person who feels that we best teach what we most need to learn. So in the process of pulling this webinar together, and I actually started it before last week, which is when I did the Recovery Coach Academy, the thoughts were going through my head on how to present it and what to present. And as we go along, you'll see some of the evolution of that for me. But clearly, as I move through this, I'm going to offer you some very valuable resources. And I think the most valuable resource that I experienced was a veteran who himself is in recovery and really opened my eyes to a 30-minute conversation. Then he was able to pass some information on to me. It's been very helpful in guiding my work in pulling this webinar together. I don't experience myself as being an expert in this topic, but I am going to work to get better and better understand it. And your questions and comments and input will be invaluable in that prospect for me, as well as your input will be valuable to the ability for us to think about how CCAR might develop a training that will have the most value for people in our community helping veterans with recovery. Peer coaching with veterans, coping through hope, connection, and empowerment. The title came up before I did the Recovery Coach Academy last week, and I firmly believe in the title because you'll see where the concept of hope comes in through a couple of very powerful diagrams that have had a significant impact on my work, and I think it'll also have an impact on the work relative to working with veterans. Uh, Nick says, well, in Maine as well as other New England states, right now we're going through a serious opiate epidemic, and one of the populations are forgotten are veterans and senior citizens in our community. We're waiting for a grant money right now, but we're hoping to get peers for these populations as a part of that creation. Great, 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 great. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and at 65 years old, and looking at Maslow's hierarchy. I mean, looking at oh, the development stages that we go through. Um, Erickson's work, I identify myself as being in that generativity generation. And much of that generativity generation is the ability to give back. And I think that'll tap into what you're talking about relative to seniors. Keep typing, folks. I'll grab your comments as they come through. Over the next hour through this webinar, we will describe the complex needs of veterans seeking and not necessarily seeking recovery, but more importantly, needing recovery. We're going to describe peer recovery coaching with veterans and what that might look like. We're going to identify pathways of recovery for veterans, which I verbalize the concept of hope. Again, it's a diagram that I think you can utilize and fashion and utilize for your own work, and describe strategies for veteran connection and empowerment. Great, Brenda. As a veteran yourself, I'm willing to help in any way I can to support the development of trainings. Very much needed. Through the, let me know what you know, however you get to do that through the work that we're doing right now. Please email me, connect with Stacy. I mean, if things come up relative to this training that you want to expand upon, you can reach me at, let me just type it in so you can see it. My email address is soulhelp at me.com. As a veteran, Brenda, you are an expert. And again, please expand upon the concepts we'll be presenting in this webinar because you're a valuable resource in this process. And I truly want to learn from you and others who have the experience and the understanding of what the needs are, and again, what the challenges might be. Basically, I'm saying I'm helping fellow veterans build richer, fuller lives, and I get the sense that that's what this is about. This is the diagram. I came across this diagram, good 10, maybe 12 years ago, prior to the advent of recovery coaching as we know it now. But over the course of my own efforts to help, for me, it's always been about a partnership. And for me, it's always been about bringing hope. An acronym for hope that's made sense for me has been having opportunities present every day. And this is an image that I found, and it's basically a public health model called Pathways in the Recovery of Adult Mental Health, that I think has great application, as far as I'm understanding and realizing, for working with not only recoveries in the sense that we work with them, but also veterans. And I think you'll see that as we move along. We'll refer back to this throughout the webinar and take bits and pieces of it, I hope, to solidify the points that are being made. And if anything, I think I'm happy to present this because it's a nice image to print out for yourself and continue to look at. And I share this with recoveries as I do the work, and I'm sure it would have value in the work with helping veterans to uncover and discover their stuff, as well as the needs and what a particular pathway may look like relative to recovery. One of the most powerful resource that I came across was this piece through SAMHSA called Fostering and Expanding Peer Support Services for Service Members, Veterans, and Their Families, and clearly in particular their families. And these are by three pretty authors who all contribute to this. I think it's a 45-page PowerPoint that I would clearly urge you to get for yourselves and to utilize. It has some very good information, especially as you were talking earlier in relation to being able to develop programs and programming, Nick. I think you'll find this a valuable resource as well. That's a very powerful resource that's had input into this work, this webinar. That's what it speaks to. Public health model pathway, just to give you a larger picture of it. This was developed in 2000, and again, it has great application. It was actually a meeting of American Public Health Association in Boston in 2000. So for me, this document has stood the time. Whew. I mentioned doing a Recovery Coach Academy last week, our February Recovery Coach Academy 2016. During that Recovery Coach Academy, most particularly on the day that we did the Power Walk or the Power Shuffle, when we asked if you're a veteran, walk to the other side of the room, the only person who walked to the other side of the room was this young man, Michael O'Neill. He is assistant manager at Anchor Recovery Center, right adjacent to here in Connecticut, in Rhode Island. And he's been a key resource in developing this webinar. When he walked, he was the only veteran to walk. And after he walked, you could see the emotions that he experienced as a result of the entire room clapping for him during his walk over as well as his walk back. The next day, as we're doing our reconnecting in the morning, he spoke again and became emotional again in relation to his gratitude for the recognition that he received as a result of people honoring and thanking him for his service. It was at that point, I appreciate the fact that this was a person I wanted to and needed to talk to. And he was gracious enough to spend a half an hour in that first connection we made during lunch. And then over time, he was able to email me further information related to his own story and the story of some family members who are veterans who've been going through some very difficult times as well. But I really wanted to thank Michael, and he thanked me for treating him as a resource in this process. But again, that's the nature of what's important for us to do, folks. If we don't know what we don't know, it's important for us to have conversations that matter so that we can be more helpful in our process and we can be more helpful in what we do with other people. So again, I'm thanking Michael O'Neill for his valuable input into this webinar. Truly a resource to this webinar. Any thoughts or questions, as we move forward, folks? And again, anything that comes up, just start typing, and I'll grab my attention before we move on. Yes, thank you, Michael. Thank you for your service, and as well, thank you, Brenda, for your service as well. So, what is the veteran peer recovery support context? What I want you to help me to think about is, what do we need to think about as we think about helping veterans? And before I give you the bullet points that come from that major PowerPoint that SAMHSA produced, what are your thoughts about what is the context in which you think about helping veterans? What are some of the key points that we want to think about as we move forward in this important work? Again, I'm in a position of teaching what I don't know, teaching what I don't know. And for me, this is an opportunity for us to help each other to know more and to know what's important to know. Because no doubt it's not all contained in this 1 hour webinar, and it's not all contained in any written matter anyway. It's where it's contained in the minds and the hearts and the feelings and the thoughts of people needing this work and doing this work. It is very important for veterans to have veterans as their peer recovery coaches. I'm seeing that, Jim. Well stated. I'm seeing that. Sort of surprised me, but then it didn't surprise me. I've got Henry and Brenda typing. Veterans are a population that have exited their military service. You'll be including military service members who are still in uniform. I don't know. I mean, what do you think? I mean, what do you think would be most helpful? I know a lot of the literature and the activity that I'm reading about is that does happen with people still in uniform within armed forces. They are developing more and more peer recovery support activities. I would hope, it's open, in making connections. I would think it would have to be. Why not, at some level, be either proactive or begin to help people to learn and make a commitment to learning on how to exit military service, or more importantly, how to live better or within the context of still being in the military service? Great question, Brenda. And again, I think your opinion counts a lot. What do you think would be most helpful? I definitely think that a peer would be somebody who's gone through the same experiences and has been successful. Yes, 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 yes. Keep writing, folks. I'll add to what you're putting up. Nearly 1.9 million U.S. troops have been deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan since October 2001. Most returned successfully to their normal lives, but many have encountered serious challenges readjusting after their return home. These wars are unlike past conflicts as a result of the demographics of an all-volunteer military population have changed drastically since previous wars. Many service members deploy multiple times. It always breaks my heart. As much as it's a pleasant and a wonderful experience to have the filming of veterans returning home and to their families, but to also hear the multiple experiences that people have had, both going um, into their service activity as well as family members being left at home. Wow. It would not be a peer if they haven't what? Had service? Clarify your question for me, Nick. Okay, let me get this. Henry writes, as a veteran of 20 years of active service with the Marines, as someone who's also worked veterans for the last 15 years, and a person of long-term series, thank you, Henry. One, thank you for your service, and thank you for this important information. Veterans want to be heard. Veterans want to be heard. Wow, I'm impressed. We've got several veterans impacting this webinar. Nothing better for me, folks. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Reservists and National Guard members are called to active duty at an unprecedented rate. More of the context. More service members are returning home with severe injuries. More women and parents of young children serve on active duty. An estimated 22 veterans commit suicide each day, according to the Department of Veteran Affairs. 40% of the returning veterans report having difficulty adjusting to civilian society, according to the Pew Research Center study. 20% of veterans, almost half of whom won't seek treatment, suffer from clinical PTSD or major depression, often leading to addiction, self-isolation, according to a RAND Corporation study. Does this in line with you appreciate the context to be, folks? Especially those of you who are veterans who are offering such powerful information to this webinar? Can you add to this support context what's not being said, what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what your perceptions are? It's all about expanding our awareness and our knowledge so that we can be in the best position to know what we need to know so that we can be most helpful. That's what this is about for me. I'm here learning from you, clearly, just as I learned from Michael. Veterans want to be heard. Actively listening, asking good questions, demonstrating significant interest, care, compassion, and for peer supporters, clearly, empathy. Got a lot of typing going on. Good. Again, anything on this context of support that people want to make reference to. I definitely think that a peer would be someone who's gone through the same experiences and been successful. Yes. Um, Veterans are a population that exit their military service. Excellent. Okay. Keep typing, folks. I'll catch up to you because again, this is adding to what we're doing. More of the context. Because stigma associated with seeking out mental health care is particularly strong within the military, veterans are one of the most difficult populations for mental health or mental care professionals to reach. What are the areas in which adjustments to civilian life are difficult? With thousands of veterans across the country suffering from PTSD, relying on the Department of Veteran Affairs for care, integrating peer support into treatment is a growing in population. They are troubled and hard to reach. I think that falls in line with your question, Jim. What are the areas in which adjustments to civilian society are difficult, and what are the troubles, and what makes veterans hard to reach? What are the adjustments that are difficult? It is important as we talk about veterans, we understand that each individual has unique qualifications that allow or deny their access to support or medical services. Thank you, Brenda. What would be the things that might deny their access to support and medical services? Because I think that begins to tap into Jim's question. What makes it difficult for veterans to adjust and gain access and support in their reentry? Getting veterans the proper care when getting home from war when they need it, and reduce the waiting periods to receiving help. Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that as a part of the literature, which is a major reason why more and more um, we're looking to peer support to help with these issues, much like we do with recovery coaching for non-veterans. The ability to get the ability to reduce the waiting period, getting veterans the proper care when getting home from war when they need it, and reduce the waiting periods would increase the population of veterans in recovery. And isn't that what we want? So the ability to offer greater support, more timely and speedy support, reduce the wait lines would help. To include branch of service for retirement is medical retirement versus time in service. Wow, you guys have a lot of ideas. Please capture these. Continue to talk about these. Continue to make us who don't have the same experience aware of what these needs are and how we can better help. The very nature of the disorder PTSD makes veterans really mistrustful. The last person they want to see is someone sitting in an office who comes from an entirely different world than their own military connections. As much as I know what the military offers and presents, it was very much um, interesting to me, and it really drew my attention to the fact of it's almost like when I worked with police, there was this blue shield. There was irregardless of what was going on in the world, they came together, they pulled together, they closed ranks, so to speak. I get the sense that that same thing happens when veterans come home or when veterans are in service. And in many ways, that's, I think, what the training seems to be. And again, correct me if I'm wrong. What the training seems to be is something that may make it difficult for people to reach out when they come out. So clearly, this last one, the nature of what veterans go through, puts them in a position of being mistrustful and not necessarily open to speaking with someone who does not have their experience or who they feel won't understand. And it's not that we've not been through this before, relative to what recoveries who are non-veterans offer. The issues of trust abound, but I think this is a deeper level of that. And please help me to hear about that if you can. Mistrustful, a key word here. Thank you, Henry. I meant to highlight it and darken it and the like. A key word, mistrust. I'm married to a woman who, her husband went to Vietnam at 19 years old. And she said when he came back 5 years later, he was a different person. And as it turned out, I have two stepsons who are now, I met them when they were 8 and 9, and they had lost their father 2 years prior to my meeting them as a result of somehow him running off Route 9 here in Middletown into the water and drowning. Part of his return home was that my wife said his behavior was very chaotic. Um, she was concerned about his drug and alcohol use, but most importantly, she was concerned about his anger and his rage. And it made a very difficult time for both her and her children. And I only raised that, and she gives me permission to talk about that, because I've been married to my wife for 30 odd years. However, it's starting to do this work that's really opened my eyes up to what she and my stepsons went through as a result of a very difficult situation that her previous husband went through. Nick speaks to reducing the stigma is the number one barrier to people asking for help and entering recovery. We must change that. What are the elements of, and again, it speaks to what Jim was asking. What are the elements of stigma that you can appreciate? That word came up, that concept came up. Part of it, I appreciate the mistrust or the PTSD symptoms, but talk about the stigma type of discharge, honorable, other than honorable, bad conduct, dishonorable. Those, yeah, those can be stigmas. And I would imagine would impact a person's ability to gain employment or to gain a recognition in society that they so deserve as a result of whatever service they've done. I'll catch up to your typing. Just want to make sure I continue to move ahead. Well, this taps into what we just talked about. I'm taking the H, the anguish, and help me to hear if this relates to what you are experiencing or you know about veteran participants or veterans who are needing recovery. This is relative to the hope diagram that I showed you, but in a broader, a bigger picture of it. It shows disorder, shame, isolation, addiction, abuse, trauma, incarceration, discrimination, disability, poverty. Make sense? Are these some of the barriers? Are these some of the the experiences, the feelings, the thinking that goes on with veterans? Does this make sense? The nasty language associated with substance abuse and the assumption that all veterans are crazy and unpredictable when coming home from the war. Stigma, labeling, assumptions, dishonor, possibly and probably creating feelings of shame, isolation, and the list. Absolutely shame and guilt. I in many ways assume that, Nick, and thank you for validating my thought, my thinking. Guilt says I did something wrong. Shame says there's something wrong with me. John Bradshaw in Shame and Addiction does a nice job of helping me to appreciate the power of shame in a person's life. There's almost no return from it, in the sense that I feel flawed, defective, and I return from an honorable duty to my country, and things happen. Not treating as a disease, but as a moral decision. Wow. A moral decision. Such assumptions, such heartbreaking work. When obtaining or renewing a security clearance, if someone indicates a substance use or treatment history, there's further investigation. Lots of time, a denial for the clearance, and that leads to a loss of a job. It must be tough to come from an environment of camaraderie and a military model that provides basic needs, food, shelter, etc., into a war with little or no reentry services. Thank you, Jim. Thank you. That's a part of the anguish as I'm experiencing it. No wonder there's isolation, a sense of being discriminated against, feelings of shame, guilt. Employers seem to be especially discriminatory towards veterans and addictions. Again, with the assumption that it's a moral choice. As you continue to write, begin to think about what might be veteran peer recovery support. Either you're offering it or you would perceive it to be offered. What are we thinking about offering relative to recovery, veteran peer recovery support? What have you seen? What have you heard? What are you implementing to begin to address the anguish, the shame? It all needs to change to get out of that vicious cycle of misfortune. Building recovery capital. Yes, yes, yes. I thought about that all along this journey and better understanding this work, Jim. I think it becomes critical. It's an opportunity for people to see that change is possible. Peer recovery support providers connect with veterans in ways that other mental health professionals can't, and am I not mistaken in saying sometimes won't? Through phone calls and on-site support groups, veteran peer recovery supporters give guidance on how to survive the day-to-day challenges of readjusting to civilian life based on their personal experience. That's where the hope can come in. Having opportunities present every day to find a way to survive the day-to-day challenges, stressors, pressures of trying to live. The role of the veteran peer recovery supporter isn't to provide psychiatric treatment or counseling or therapy, but to help break down the barriers that are blocking other veterans from getting the care they need. What are your thoughts about these concepts, folks? Make sense? Does it have value? Housing and self-sustainability are critical. Yes. Offsets the feelings of shame. Thank you, Nick. So much of recovery coaching is a self-empowerment model. So much of recovery coaching is helping people to take personal responsibility for their lives. We can also personally let veterans know that we honor them. Yeah, that's so important. I mean, I've done Recovery Coach Academy scores of times. And I would say 98% of the time when a veteran walks across that power walk activity and becomes applauded, there's no doubt in the emotion and the appreciation they feel for having been honored and recognized versus what many of them have verbalized has not been the case prior to that experience. That is a step in the right direction. Peer support provides the clear mind and patience that it takes to get through the maze to support. Well stated, Brenda. We Peer support provides a clear mind and patience that it takes to get through the maze to support. And who better to have that patience, that compassion, that empathy than someone who's gone through the gauntlet themselves? Well stated, Brenda. The issue becomes how do we develop that? How do we begin to pass that on? Clear mind and patience. One of the clear prerequisites for the work of being a peer recovery supporter. I have no doubt imagine. Peer recovery support is common experiences, particularly for those who have served in combat, bind individuals together. Shared experience are the foundation for peer support as they foster the initial trust and credibility necessary for developing relationships in which individuals are willing to open up and discuss their problems despite concerns about stigma. Peer-to-peer programs facilitate opportunities, there's that hope piece, for individuals to talk with trained peer supporters who can offer educational, social support, and provide avenues for additional help if needed. I've heard this. I mean, for me, that's that clear mind and patience that you talk about, Brenda. It's that ability to get through the maze, to get to the support. They call it avenues for additional help, is to get to the support. Again, does this fall in line with what you feel is important in helping to develop services for veterans? It's that awakening part piece, to trust in one other person, to anger, to believe in self. Moments of clear thinking. There you go, Brenda, you're right on it. Moments of clear thinking. And when I look at this will to survive and this awakening, for me, this is what I think veteran peer recovery supporters can bring. I think as a result of going through their own process and being in a position to help another person to get through a process towards greater health and well being, it begins with trusting in one other person. To be angry with what's happened, but begin to believe in oneself. And part of believing in oneself and appreciating those moments of clear thinking is helping another person. A personal state as a woman or a man, to faith or love, and looking at the police as society's front line. These are things that appreciate the awakening and a will to survive. Think about the importance of that will to survive, especially with the large numbers relative to suicide, or the large numbers relative to depression, and the large numbers relative to issues of shame and guilt, and the ability to begin to believe in oneself. I talk about it a lot when we do our Recovery Coach Academy and when I work with people. You know, many times it takes one other person believing in me more than I believed in myself to begin to believe in oneself. So when you look at this slide, I really see it as what a peer recovery um, coach supporting veterans has the potential to bring and talk about as a way of helping a veteran to awaken to that will to survive. Any thoughts on this, folks? Does this make sense to you? Again, I'm going back to that initial hope diagram and taking pieces that I see fit. And again, this piece really more fits who the peer recovery supporter can be. And at some level, I would hope has done in their own lives to get to the place where they can help another person. Yes, a lot of barriers are being removed. There is such power in connection. And remember, that's a part of the title. Such power in connection, such anguish and powerlessness in disconnection and isolation. So one of the critical barriers is to develop a relationship that works with another human being who could stand the support to move beyond where they are. Having someone believe in you and having that will to survive just for them can be a savior. Excellent. Was for me. The Illusions by Richard Bach speaks about the adventures of a reluctant Messiah, which is a savior. Many times people are reluctant to save themselves, but that reluctance sometimes falls away when they see someone else working very hard to help them to save themselves. And clearly we don't want to disappoint them. That comes up later. Purpose of peer recovery support services: to expand and enhance support capacity through the provision of peer support for service members, veterans, and their families with community reintegration challenges. So I think that answers the question that was asked earlier. I think it was by Brenda, if I'm not mistaken. It seems to me that service members are included in this process as they're beginning to build it. Purpose of recovery support services: to have those with lived experience play an integral role in the design, development, and implementation of the program and provide a bridge to services and help to ease the transition to their communities. I was struck by the importance of treating veterans as resources in the development, design, and implementation of programming, not just as veteran peer supporters, but as veteran peer supporter planners and developers and leaders of the process. Treating people as resources helps offset shame and guilt. The support of families is a key. Families seem to always be forgotten in the mix. Yeah, I agree, Nick. I think we're doing a much better job throughout the recovery field, throughout the recovery process, of tapping into the resource as well as the importance of family getting well as well. How else do we ease that transition? And the transition needs to be eased on both sides, the returning veteran as well as the family receiving them back home. So it's important that we not forget families in the mix as you speak to it. Yes. The family serves too. I've heard that before, and that makes such sense to me. Purpose of peer recovery support services. Peers with military experience and experience with recovery from trauma, mental health, or other issues can offer valuable knowledge and skills to assist others. Primary service objective is to help achieve and maintain transition resiliency and to improve the overall quality of life for those being served. Again, with the powerful collaboration that I'm experiencing so far with those of you who have much more knowledge in this area than I do, help me to understand what you perceive to be transition resiliency. Describe that for me. What might transition resiliency mean relative to the primary services that we're offering veterans? What is resiliency? And what might be transition resiliency? And I think this goes on the part of both sides. For me, resiliency is really about, kids are more resilient than adults are. It's the ability to bounce back. It's the ability to spring back. It's the ability as I'm going through transitions to take it one day at a time, to appreciate that this too shall pass, and to appreciate that the ability to look at the larger picture is the ability for me to be more comfortable moving through the struggles that the smaller piece day to day presents to me. Anything before we move on to some of the principles of support services that William White posits? And again, this comes from that very large PowerPoint that I noted up front. Prayer principle number one, William White speaks about, is the wounded warrior. This speaks to the kinship of common suffering creates communities of shared experience. Not unlike what happens in 12-step rooms or what happens in recovery for those who are not veterans. But there's a different kind of a kinship that goes here, as I'm understanding, and creates communities of shared experience. Warriors and their families can be wounded on and off the battlefield. Warriors and their families can be wounded on and off the battlefield. My wife and my two stepsons were certainly wounded by the death of their father. And more importantly, they were wounded prior to the death of their father by the person that they experienced him being when he returned from Vietnam. How can we not pay attention to the family and the children who, as Brenda so well stated, also served us? I would research how military training uses the word resilience training. Thank you. I'll do that. Because it will have application to the work. It will be a familiar term that we can build on. Community commitment, i.e. a warrior ethos was the original word there, and a warrior ethos is a warrior code. We will never abandon a fallen comrade. And that ethos, that code, is critical to bring to this work. And I think it's a critical part of what I think veteran recovery supporters will bring. Not can bring, I think they will bring it. I think that's a major piece of the culture that a veteran experiences that will have tremendous power on the work we're trying to do. Jim's typing. I'll just do one more bullet, waiting for his typing. And this personal commitment, recovery by any means necessary under any circumstances. We would hope that the veteran would take on that perception, that belief, that stance, that activity. But I think those of us who are helping them can demonstrate that commitment to them so that commitment becomes better for them. Yeah, it does remind me of the Warrior Down. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's probably where it comes from because William White has a lot of connection with the White Bison crew. very, very powerful image. Every time, many times, Phil Valentine brings it up when we're doing the Recovery Coach Academy, and he cannot say Warrior Dad without tears coming to his eyes. And I can't hear it without that perception as well. We need to embrace that as long as they are safe, whatever works for them, meeting them where they're at, whatever makes them safe, whatever makes their families feel safe. The ability to remove barriers to their stability for them to feel safe and to be safe. How can we not provide these types of environments? And again, when you think about peer recovery support services and the concept of being peers in the process, I think we can all, whether we're in the military or not, we can all lend to the environments that veterans are making an honest effort to recover in and live in and be in. I think we in our own personal commitment, I for myself am appreciating the importance of supporting recovery by any means, under any means necessary and under any circumstances. It's about functioning functionally in dysfunction, helping people to live through the pain and the fear is a critical process, and I think we all move through it. Resilience is all about mental toughness. It goes against admitting you need help, such as an internal struggle for both the military. Wow. Wow. Mental toughness. So that would be a barrier, wouldn't it, Brenda? It could be a potential barrier, a sense that really helped one in the military environment, and yet seems it would work against someone coming out of that environment and putting up the walls to the effort to get help. And just with the environmental mental toughness, resilience aspect of it, and then you heap on the shame and the stigma. Wow, what a tremendous obstacle. For informed choice and speaking for oneself, when we think about action planning, these are action plans that you would hope that a veteran who is supporting a veteran would have and could be able to teach a veteran who would benefit from these processes. Action planning, wellness planning, resilience planning, recovery capital planning, providing informed choice, the ability to speak for oneself, seeking help, mental health and addiction services for families, self-help groups, friends or faith communities, public entitlements, all the things, the resources necessary to bring to bear to begin to ease against the burdens and the obstacles that people are experiencing. The ability to get what one deserves and one's needs begins to impact, I would imagine, the shame and the guilt and the fear and the desire to isolation. More importantly, the powerlessness and the helplessness that veterans are so feeling, as well as their families. Again, this is very powerful information. The family is expected to be a direct reflection of their military members' resilience. That must set up conflict in the heads of people who aren't in that environment, family who aren't in there. We need to be at ease and not in dis-ease. I love it, Nick. Well stated. Well stated. We must be at ease/serenity and not in dis-ease. Principles of recovery support services, William White again. Recovery principle number 2, the wounded healer. A kinship value of experiential knowledge. The wounded healer being the peer recovery supporter specialist. Power of mutual identification and storytelling. That's what you can bring as a helper in this process. Living proof that healing, wholeness, and renewed purpose are possible. That recovery is contagious via the recovery carriers sharing experience, strength, and hope. That self and shared determination brings a pursuit of employment and home, pursuit of happiness and well-being, pursuit of values and social roles, taking pride in survivor skills and powers, remembering that one alone is not alone, and reclaiming one's culture or spiritual values as a person with a future. Again, I see veteran recovery, peer recovery supporters embracing and finding their own pathway to these concepts and having the ability to share them, to share not only the concepts, but also share the determination to achieve these concepts with veterans seeking recovery and their families. Peer principle number 3, the helper principle and power of community kinship. Helping generates reciprocal benefit. Creating sanctuaries, communities of mutual healing and helping. Again, the White Bison Group speaks to a healing force where people can be who they need to be in order to heal and grow and learn. Community mantra of strength. We're all sick and struggling, but we're not all sick on the same day. Again, it demonstrates the power of the helper in this process, helping the person needing help. And when people talk to me, I say I am well enough, which doesn't mean I still don't need help. Core characteristics of peer support relationships, they're natural. There's a non-hierarchy to it. There's a minimal power differential. They're reciprocal, meaning that both parties are benefiting and gaining. It's accessible, most critical. It's enduring, and it's not commercialized. It's not about the dollar. It's about the hope and the sense of connection and the opportunity to practice humanity that I think is so critical to this process. It helps us to be more at ease versus dis-ease. And that relationship becomes the key. That peer helping a peer and developing relationships that work, modeling relationships that work, and that have the potential for more success. Peer principle number 5, peer professional collaboration. Peer and professionals are not in an opposing paradigm. Brenda states some veterans are seeking that hierarchical relationship or support. They can relate to that and sometimes seek that out. So we can be forewarned of that. And sometimes what I'm hearing from that is that sometimes veterans may come into a relationship expecting to be treated as either a recipient of services or an object. And we have to be careful that we, as much as we possibly can, help them to experience the respect and the dignity of being treated as resources. And again, if they're seeking that out, we meet them where they're at and we help them to appreciate a different way of looking at it, perhaps, or certainly we can treat them in a way that we see them as resources. Looking for the structure that they feel comfortable in. Well stated. Meeting them where they're at is helping to develop a structure that they feel comfortable in as they gain their comfortability. Thank you, Brenda. Search for potent combinations and sequences that speed and sustain healing. I think that taps into what Brenda just said. Potent combinations and sequences, meaning it's not about me, it's about the veteran and what works for them, and building on what works for them, offering combinations that have power and capabilities to sequence into a process that works for their sustaining their healing. And it's a philosophy of choice, which gets into their comfort zone, not our comfort zone. Critical veteran peer service areas. I think this is some of what Jim was speaking to earlier. Mental health services, i.e. post-traumatic stress disorder, suicide prevention, major depression. Developmental disability services, traumatic brain injury and neurobehavioral services. Substance abuse services, prescription abuse, tobacco cessation, driving while intoxicated, and binge drinking. Other critical veteran or peer service areas that those with more knowledge than I have want to offer here. Sleep issues. I've heard that. And how do we address those without putting a person into greater jeopardy to abuse themselves or something? See, the more we know, the more we can explore, the more we can help to be able to talk about and relate with. Recovery is a recovery of mental and emotional order, abilities, respect, independence, and in some ways citizenship, despite the fact they've defended our citizenship. Yes, I'm sorry. Well, this is an old document. I apologize. This is a very old document, 2000. I agree with you, Nick. Substance use disorder. That's some of the language that we talk about in Recovery Coach Cabot needs to be changed. Just slipped right by me. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Nick. Questions, thoughts, or comments? We've got a couple of minutes left. Review more of what you know, what you're thinking, what would be helpful for us to know. Got people writing? I will looking for what you're offering. Simply the change we speak about addiction recovery will help in reducing the stigma. Yes. Must be remembered. We're here to treat people as resources and with dignity and respect. Citizenship is a big part of being in the military. You are a citizen of the branch of the service, tour of duty, enlisted. Wow. Yeah, I agree, Jim. I agree. I'm getting a clue about what I don't know as well. I think for me, this last 3 or 4 weeks of preparing for this webinar have offered me tremendous insight and awareness, and just has been enhanced by the work that I so gratefully appreciate that you all have done today. I mean, I come away with more than I came in looking for. I hope this was helpful for everyone, but it's certainly been helpful for me, who is someone looking to, if nothing else, do no harm when I'm sitting with a veteran seeking or in need of recovery. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm going to go back and read a lot of the comments that you all made, because you made some comments that I'm certainly going to move forward with and incorporate in my own work. As a veteran and a worker in the helping profession, this has been one of the most refreshing trainings I've attended. The awareness and the plight of veterans have been discussed. Thank you. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for being here and adding to this. Um, I just thank you, folks. Thank you so much. Listen, enjoy your day.